Jake Morrison sat by his small campfire, watching the flames dance in the cool Montana night. He had driven 3 hours into the wilderness to find this perfect spot. No roads, no cell towers, no people. Just him, his camera equipment, and the endless forest that stretched in every direction. The former Marine had traded his rifle for a camera lens 2 years ago. After 8 years of military service, he wanted something peaceful. Wildlife photography gave him that peace. The patience required was the same as being a sniper, but now he captured life instead of taking it. Jake poked the fire with a stick and looked up at the star-filled sky. Living in cities made people forget how many stars were really up there. Out here, away from all the lights, the night sky looked like someone had thrown diamonds across black cloth. He had planned to wake up before dawn to photograph the elk that came to drink at the nearby stream. A strange humming sound made him look up again. At first, Jake thought it might be a helicopter, but the sound was wrong. Too smooth, too quiet. He squinted at the stars, trying to find the source of the noise. That was when he saw it. A dark shape moved across the stars, blocking them out as it passed. The thing was huge, maybe the size of a football field, and it made no sound except for that low humming. Jake had seen plenty of aircraft during his military days, but nothing like this. The shape stopped moving and hung in the air directly above his campsite. Jake's military training kicked in. He rolled away from the fire and grabbed his backpack. Something was very wrong here. The government did not have aircraft that could hover silently like that. At least, not any aircraft that Jake knew about. A beam of soft blue light suddenly shot down from the object above. The light was so bright that Jake had to cover his eyes. When he could see again, he found 3 figures standing at the edge of his campsite. They were not human. The beings were tall, maybe 7 feet, with long, thin arms and legs. Their skin was pale blue and seemed to glow slightly in the firelight. They had large eyes that took up most of their face and no hair that Jake could see. They wore what looked like silver jumpsuits that reflected the firelight. Jake reached for his hunting knife, but his arm would not move. In fact, his whole body would not move. He could still breathe and blink, but everything else was frozen. Some kind of invisible force held him in place like he was trapped in concrete. One of the aliens stepped closer and made clicking sounds. The clicks seemed to be some kind of language, but Jake could not understand any of it. The alien held up a small device that looked like a metal wand. It pointed the device at Jake, and more clicking sounds filled the air. Another alien joined, the first one. This one seemed nervous and kept looking around the campsite like it expected something dangerous to jump out of the trees. Jake found this strange. He was the one who should be nervous. He was frozen and helpless while these things stood around clicking at each other. The third alien stayed back near the trees. It held what looked like a weapon, though Jake could not be sure. The device was shaped like a long tube with lights along the side. The alien kept the weapon pointed at the ground, but its large eyes never stopped watching Jake. The first alien finished with its clicking device and stepped even closer. Jake could smell something like flowers and metal coming from the creature. Up close, he could see that its skin was not just blue, but had patterns of darker blue lines running across it like veins. The alien reached out with one long finger and touched Jake's forehead. The touch was warm and sent a tingling feeling through his skull. More clicking sounds came from the alien, but now Jake could almost understand them. Not the words exactly, but the meaning behind them. The alien seemed to be saying that Jake was perfect for something, that he was exactly what they were looking for. The clicking sounds had a pleased tone to them, like someone who had just found a $20 bill on the sidewalk. Jake tried to speak, to ask what they wanted, but his mouth would not work. The invisible force that held his body also kept him from making any sound. All he could do was watch and listen as the aliens discussed him like he was a prize at a county fair. The nervous alien made more clicking sounds. These clicks sounded worried and urgent. It kept pointing at Jake and then at the weapon the third alien carried. Jake got the feeling that the nervous one thought he was dangerous somehow. The first alien made dismissive clicking sounds and waved its hand. Jake understood that it was telling the nervous one not to worry. The alien looked at Jake like he was nothing more than a large dog that might bite if not handled carefully. This made Jake angry. even frozen and helpless, being treated like an animal made his blood boil. He had been a Marine sniper, one of the best in his unit. He had survived tours in 3 different countries and came home in one piece. Now these blue freaks were treating him like he was some kind of pet they had found in the woods. The beam of light from above grew brighter. Jake felt his feet leave the ground as he started floating upward toward the dark shape in the sky. The aliens walked beneath him as he rose, still making their clicking sounds. As Jake floated higher, he could see his campsite getting smaller below. His fire still burned, and his camera equipment sat where he had left it. By morning, someone might find his camp and wonder what had happened to him, but Jake doubted anyone would believe the truth. The last thing Jake saw before entering the alien ship was the endless Montana forest stretching out in all directions. Somewhere down there was his truck, his life, and everything he knew. Now, he was going somewhere else entirely, and he had no idea if he would ever see Earth again. The blue light faded as Jake passed through what felt like a wall of warm water. Then everything went dark. Jake woke up on something soft that felt like a cross between a bed and moss. His head hurt and his mouth tasted like metal. For a moment, he thought the whole alien thing had been a bad dream. Then he opened his eyes and saw the curved walls, glowing with soft green light. He was definitely not in Montana anymore. Jake sat up slowly and looked around. The room was bigger than his apartment back home, with walls that curved up to meet the ceiling in smooth lines. There were no corners anywhere, like the whole space had been carved from the inside of an egg. Plants that he did not recognize grew from the walls themselves, their leaves giving off the green light that filled the room. A small stream of clear water ran along one side of the room and disappeared into the wall. Jake could hear birds singing, but when he looked up, he saw tiny speakers hidden among the fake leaves of artificial trees. Even the air smelled like a forest, complete with the scent of pine and earth. It was a very nice prison, but it was still a prison. Jake stood up and walked to what looked like a window. Beyond the clear wall, he could see stars and the curve of a huge planet below. The planet was orange and red with swirling clouds, and it was big enough to fill half the view. Jake realized he was on some kind of space station orbiting this gas giant. Movement caught his eye. On the other side of the clear wall, a blue alien in a silver suit was watching him. When the alien saw Jake looking back, it held up a small device and started making clicking sounds. Other aliens joined the first one, all of them staring at Jake like he was an exhibit at a zoo, because that was exactly what he was. Jake walked along the wall and discovered his prison was shaped like a large circle. The clear wall went all the way around, giving the aliens a perfect view of everything he did. He found a place to relieve himself hidden behind some fake rocks, a food dispenser that dropped strange colored cubes when he touched it, and a section with exercise equipment that looked almost human. The aliens had done their homework, but they had made some mistakes. Jake picked up one of the food cubes and sniffed it. It smelled like chicken and tasted better than military rations. While he ate, he watched the aliens watching him. He counted 7 different ones over the first hour. They seemed very excited about everything he did, from drinking water to stretching his muscles. One alien was different from the others. This one wore a white suit instead of silver and carried a tablet-like device. It had more patterns on its blue skin and seemed to be in charge. Jake decided this was probably the head scientist or doctor. The white-suited alien pointed at Jake and made clicking sounds to the others. Jake could not understand the language, but he understood the tone. The alien was giving a lecture about him, probably explaining what kind of creature humans were and why they were interesting to study. Jake started his own study. He walked around his prison and looked at everything carefully. The walls were made of some clear material that felt warm to the touch. He could see small vents near the ceiling where air came in. The fake trees were held in place by metal brackets that looked strong but had visible bolts. Most importantly, Jake noticed that the aliens got nervous when he moved quickly or picked up anything that could be used as a tool. When he lifted a rock from the fake stream, 3 aliens came running to watch. When he did some push-ups, they all started clicking excitedly and making notes. They were afraid of him. Jake found this very interesting. Here he was, trapped in their space zoo, and they were worried about what he might do. That meant they knew something about humans that made them cautious. Maybe they knew more about his species than he had first thought. Over the next few days, Jake developed a routine. He would wake up, eat the food cubes, exercise, and explore every inch of his prison. He tested the strength of the walls by pushing against them. He examined the exercise equipment to see if any parts could be removed. He watched the fake birds in the speakers and listened to the sounds they made. All the while, the aliens watched him and took notes. Jake noticed patterns in their behavior. The white-suited alien came by 3 times each day, always at the same times. The other aliens worked in shifts, with new ones replacing the old ones every 8 hours. During one shift, change. The observation area was empty for almost 10 minutes. He also noticed that some aliens were more nervous than others. The younger ones stayed farther back from the wall and jumped when Jake moved suddenly. The older ones seemed more confident, but even they kept their distance when Jake picked up anything heavy. On the 4th day, Jake saw something that changed everything. Through the clear wall, he could see into other sections of the space station, and in those sections he saw more prisons like his own. Some held creatures he could not identify, things that looked like walking trees or balls of light. But in one prison, he saw something that made his blood run cold, a human woman. She looked to be in her 30s with dark hair and was wearing what looked like hiking clothes. She sat on the moss-like bed in her prison and stared at the wall with empty eyes. Jake could see that she had been there much longer than he had. Her clothes were clean but worn, and she moved like someone who had given up hope. Jake pressed his hands against the wall and tried to get her attention, but she was too far away. The aliens noticed his sudden interest and came running to see what had excited him. When they saw him looking at the other human, they started clicking rapidly among themselves. The white-suited alien held up its device and made more clicking sounds. This time, Jake caught what sounded like his name and the woman's name being mentioned. The aliens were talking about them both, probably comparing notes on human behavior. That night, Jake lay on his bed and stared at the ceiling. He was not just a prisoner. He was a specimen in some kind of galactic zoo, and he was not alone. There were other humans here, and probably more being collected from Earth right now. The aliens thought they were studying peaceful creatures from a dangerous planet. They had no idea they had just captured a trained killer who now had every reason to fight back. Jake closed his eyes and started planning. Jake had been watching the aliens for 2 weeks, learning their patterns and finding their weaknesses. Every day he pretended to be a harmless prisoner while secretly preparing for war. The aliens had made their first mistake by giving him plants. The fake trees in his prison looked real, but Jake knew plants. During survival training, he had learned which ones could be useful. Some of the alien plants had leaves that turned acidic when crushed. Jake had been collecting these leaves and hiding them in a hollow rock near the stream. Their second mistake was the exercise equipment. The aliens wanted to keep him healthy, so they gave him weights and bars to work out with. What they did not realize was that Jake had been slowly loosening the bolts that held everything together. A loose metal bar made an excellent weapon. Their biggest mistake was thinking he was alone. Jake had figured out how to communicate with some of the other prisoners. The creature that looked like walking crystal could tap messages on its wall, and the tapping carried through the station's structure. Jake learned that the crystal being was called Shard and had been captured from a silicon-based world. Shard was angry about being trapped and wanted revenge just as much as Jake did. There was also a gas creature that the aliens called Drift. It looked like a cloud of yellow smoke, but it was actually very intelligent. Drift could change its shape and density, and the aliens had no idea it could squeeze through the tiny air vents between sections of the station. On the 15th day, Jake's chance finally came. The white-suited alien that Jake thought of as the head scientist was working, late in the observation area. All the other aliens had gone to sleep or whatever they did during their rest periods. Jake could see maintenance robots moving through the corridors outside, doing their nightly repairs and cleaning. This was the moment Jake had been waiting for. He took the acidic plant juice he had been collecting and poured it on the bolts holding his fake trees in place. The metal started smoking and dissolving. Within minutes, Jake had created a hole just big enough to crawl through. The head scientist noticed something was wrong when the air quality sensor started beeping. By the time it looked up from its tablet, Jake was already gone. Jake crawled through the space between the walls, following the path he had memorized from watching the maintenance robots. The station was bigger than he had thought, with hundreds of corridors and levels. But Jake had been paying attention, and he knew exactly where he needed to go. First, he went to Shard's prison. The crystal being was waiting for him, having felt the vibrations of Jake moving through the walls. Jake used his metal bar to break the lock on Shard's cell. The crystal creature stood up, its body catching and reflecting light like a living diamond. Shard could interface with the station's computer systems by touching the crystal components that powered everything. Within minutes, Shard had disabled the security cameras in their section and unlocked several other cells. Jake and Shard moved quickly through the station, freeing other prisoners. Most were too scared or confused to help, but a few joined their escape. Drift the gas creature was especially useful because it could scout ahead and warn them about guards. The aliens were not prepared for this kind of problem. Their security was designed to keep prisoners in their cells, not to stop them once they got out. Jake had been trained for urban warfare, and moving through the station was just like clearing buildings back on Earth. By the time the aliens realized what was happening, Jake and his team had taken control of the main computer center. Shard plugged into the central crystal matrix, while Jake stood guard with weapons he had taken from security stations. The first alien guards to arrive were shocked to find a human holding their own energy weapons. Jake had figured out how the weapons worked by watching the guards carry them. Point, squeeze the grip, and blue energy came out the front. Simple enough. When the guards tried to use their paralyzing beams on Jake, they discovered another problem. Jake had learned to move unpredictably, rolling and dodging like he was back in combat. The beams missed and Jake's return fire did not. More guards arrived, but they were not fighters. They were scientists and researchers who had never dealt with violent resistance. Jake moved through them like a wolf through sheep, taking their weapons and using their own equipment against them. Shard finished downloading the station's entire database, including the locations of Earth and all the other captured humans. The crystal being also found something that made Jake very angry, records showing that the aliens had been taking humans for over a year. There were dozens of them scattered across different research stations. The head scientist in the white suit finally arrived with a larger group of guards. It held up its translation device and started making clicking sounds that Jake now understood meant surrender and no harm will come to you. Jake's response was to point his captured energy weapon directly at the alien's large head. The scientist backed away quickly, clicking frantically at its guards. Jake could see the fear in its big eyes. The alien finally understood that humans were not harmless specimens to be studied. They were predators, and they were very, very angry. Jake made his demands simple. He wanted a ship, navigation charts, to get back to human space and the coordinates of every research station holding human prisoners. If the aliens refused, Jake would start showing them exactly how dangerous humans could be when they stopped holding back. The head scientist looked around at its defeated guards, the damaged computer systems, and the other escaped prisoners who were now following Jake's lead. Then it started clicking its agreement to everything Jake had asked for. Within an hour, Jake and his team were aboard a small research vessel, flying away from the station toward human space. But Jake was not planning to just go home. He had a list of other stations to visit and a lot of humans to rescue. The aliens had wanted to study the galaxy's most dangerous Deathworlder. Now they were about to learn what that really meant. Word of Jake's escape spread through the galaxy faster than his stolen ship could travel. Within days, every major alien government knew that a human had broken out of the most secure research station in known space and was now loose with alien technology. The Galactic Council met in emergency session on the capital world of Zentara Prime. Representatives from dozens of species argued about what to do. The blue-skinned Zephyrians who had captured Jake insisted he was just one unusually clever specimen. The insect-like Krathen claimed that all humans were probably dangerous and should be avoided completely. Fleet Commander Vexthon of the Hegemony Navy was put in charge of the hunt. The massive reptilian warrior had fought in 3 galactic wars and crushed rebellions on 50 worlds. He commanded the most powerful military force in the galaxy and had never failed to capture his target. Vexthon looked at the reports about Jake Morrison and laughed. One small mammal from a primitive world had embarrassed the scientific community, but this was a job for real warriors. He assembled a task force of 20 warships and set out to bring the human back dead or alive. Jake, meanwhile, was learning to fly an alien spaceship with help from Shard and Drift. The crystal being could interface with the ship's computer systems, while the gas creature could flow through the ship's mechanisms to repair damage and improve performance. The research vessel was not built for combat, but Jake was making it work anyway. He had studied the weapon systems and figured out how to modify them for maximum damage. More importantly, he was learning how alien ships thought and moved. Their tactics were different from human military doctrine, and Jake was adapting fast. Jake's first target was Research Station Beta 9, which according to the stolen data held 6 human prisoners. The station was smaller than the one he had escaped from, orbiting a dead moon in an abandoned system. When Jake arrived, he did not announce himself or try to negotiate. He simply attacked. The station's defenses were designed to keep ships away, not to fight a small vessel that moved like it was alive. Jake flew the research ship like he was back in Afghanistan, dodging surface-to-air missiles. He used the ship's mining lasers to cut through the station's hull and landed in the docking bay before anyone could stop him. The aliens at Beta 9 had heard about the escape at Omega 7, but they had not really believed the reports. When Jake came through their airlock carrying weapons and moving like a soldier, they finally understood what they were dealing with. Jake did not waste time with threats or demands. He moved through the station systematically, freeing every prisoner he found and taking anything useful. The human captives were weak from months in captivity, but they were alive and angry. Jake armed them with captured alien weapons and taught them the basics of combat in 10 minutes. By the time reinforcements arrived, Jake and his growing team were already gone, heading for the next target on his list. Commander Vexthon's task force reached Beta 9 3 hours too late. The station was intact but empty, its research staff locked in their own holding cells and all the specimens missing. Security recordings showed a human moving through the corridors like a ghost, appearing and disappearing faster than the cameras could track. What worried Vexthon most was how the other escaped prisoners had started fighting like humans. Creatures that had been docile and harmless were now working together with military precision. The human had somehow taught them to be warriors in just a few weeks. Jake hit 2 more research stations over the next month, each time learning and improving his tactics. He rescued 23 humans total and freed dozens of other alien prisoners. Some of the aliens chose to stay with Jake's group, forming a small but deadly crew that the galaxy had never seen before. The alien governments were starting to panic. Jake was not just rescuing prisoners anymore. He was attacking military supply depots and stealing advanced weapons. He had somehow figured out how to upgrade his ship's engines and shields using stolen technology. Worst of all, he was broadcasting messages to Earth, telling humanity exactly what was happening to their people. Commander Vexthon finally cornered Jake's ship near the Korath Nebula, using his entire task force to block all escape routes. 20 massive warships surrounded Jake's small research vessel, their weapons powered up and ready to fire. Vexthon opened a communication channel, expecting the human to surrender when faced with impossible odds. Instead, Jake's voice came, through the speakers, calm and confident. "Commander Vexthon, I've been studying your tactics for weeks. You fight like you're still in the last war, using formations that worked against enemies who played by your rules. But I'm not from your galaxy, and I don't play by anyone's rules, but my own." Before Vexthon could respond, Jake's ship vanished. It took the alien commander several minutes to figure out what had happened. Jake had used the nebula's radiation to hide his heat signature, while launching dozens of small probes. The probes were actually mining charges that Jake had reprogrammed to work as guided missiles. The explosions disabled half of Vexthon's ships and created enough chaos for Jake to escape through a gap in the alien formation. As his research vessel disappeared into hyperspace, Jake sent one final message to the Hegemony fleet. "Tell your Galactic Council that I'm coming home, and when humanity finds out what you've been doing to our people, This little hunt of yours is going to seem like a friendly game of tag." Commander Vexathon stared at his damaged fleet and realized that everything he thought he knew about warfare had just become obsolete. The human had not just outfought them, he had outthought them completely. For the first time in his long military career, Vexathon was afraid. Jake's messages had reached Earth 6 weeks after his escape from the research station. The signals traveled through deep space monitoring stations that NASA had built to listen for alien contact. What they heard instead was one of their own, people telling them that humans were being kidnapped and put in alien zoos. Admiral Kate Sullivan was in command of Earth's newest deep space fleet when the messages arrived. The former Air Force pilot had been chosen to lead humanity's first real venture into interstellar space. The fleet consisted of 12 warships that had been built using technology reverse-engineered from crashed alien probes. Kate read Jake's transmissions 3 times before she believed them. Aliens were real. They had been taking humans for over a year, and one Marine sniper was currently fighting a one-man war across the galaxy to get them back. The situation was so insane that it had to be true. Within hours, Kate's fleet was in hyperspace, heading for the coordinates Jake had provided. Earth's government had spent decades preparing for first contact with aliens. They had never prepared for war. Jake was waiting at the rendezvous point near the galactic core when 24 ships dropped out of hyperspace. 12 were human warships that looked like flying daggers covered in weapons. The other 12 belonged to Commander Vexathon, who had finally cornered his target. For a moment, nobody moved. The human fleet and the alien fleet faced each other across empty space while Jake's small research vessel sat between them like a tiny spark that might start a galactic war. Admiral Sullivan opened a communication channel to both fleets. Her voice was calm, but carried the authority of someone who had commanded fighter squadrons in Earth's most dangerous conflicts. "Commander Vexathon, I am Admiral Kate Sullivan of the Earth Defense Force. You are currently holding one of our citizens prisoner and have been kidnapping our people for illegal experimentation. We demand the immediate return of Jake Morrison and all other human captives." Vexathon's reply came through the translation systems with clicks and growls that sounded angry, even in English. "Admiral Sullivan, the human Jake Morrison is a dangerous fugitive who has attacked civilian research stations and killed security personnel. He must be returned to face justice for his crimes." Kate's response was ice cold. "Commander, you kidnapped our people and put them in cages. Jake Morrison did exactly what any human would do in that situation. The only crime here was committed by your people." While the two commanders talked, Jake was preparing for the fight he knew was coming. He had positioned his ship between the two fleets on purpose. If shooting started, he wanted to be right in the middle of it. Dr. Catherine, the head scientist from the first research station, was aboard Vexathon's flagship as an advisor. She had studied Jake for weeks and thought she understood human behavior. Now she watched the human fleet through the ship's sensors and realized how wrong she had been. The human warships moved differently than any vessels she had ever seen. They did not fly in neat formations or follow predictable patterns. Instead, they spread out and moved like a pack of predators surrounding prey. Their weapon systems were crude compared to alien technology, but there were so many weapons on each ship that it did not matter. Commander Vexathon was also studying the human fleet and coming to the same conclusion. These were not exploration vessels or research ships. These were weapons of war built by a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing each other. The standoff might have continued for hours, but Jake decided to end it himself. He opened a communication channel to both fleets and spoke directly to every ship in the area. "My name is Jake Morrison. 6 weeks ago, I was camping in Montana when aliens kidnapped me and put me in a zoo. Since then, I've learned that my species is not alone in the universe and that some of our new neighbors think it's okay to steal people from their homes." Jake paused and looked at the tactical display showing both fleets. "I've also learned that humans are apparently the scariest thing most aliens have ever seen. They call us Deathworlders and dangerous specimens. Well, they're right. We are dangerous, but we're only dangerous to people who threaten us or hurt our families." "Admiral." Sullivan listened to Jake's speech and felt proud of the young Marine. He had been alone in hostile territory for weeks, fighting impossible odds, and he still sounded like a soldier ready for battle. "Commander Vexthon," Jake continued, "you can either let me and my people go home, or you can find out why humans have a reputation for being the galaxy's most dangerous species. Your choice." Vexthon looked at his tactical display and considered his options. His 12 ships were powerful, but the human fleet outnumbered him, and their weapons were designed for maximum destruction. More importantly, his intelligence reports said that Earth had more fleets like this one, and they were all heading this way. Dr. Catherine whispered something to Vexthon about human psychology and pack behavior. She had finally understood that Jake was not alone anymore. He was part of a species that protected its own members no matter what the cost. The alien commander made his decision. "Admiral Sullivan, I am withdrawing my forces. The human, Jake Morrison, and his companions are free to return to Earth space. However, the Galactic Council will want to discuss this situation with your government." Kate smiled grimly. "Commander, the Galactic Council can send representatives to Earth anytime they want to talk. But they better come in peace because after what we've learned today, humanity is not in a very trusting mood." Jake docked his research vessel with Admiral Sullivan's flagship and finally came home. As the human fleet jumped to hyperspace heading back to Earth, Jake looked out at the stars and realized that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and the universe was about to learn that humans were exactly as dangerous as their reputation suggested, but only to those who made the mistake of treating them as enemies first.